Welcome, welcome. Say hello as you guys are hopping on. Welcome to YouTube for our divine call today. You are catching us on YouTube. I don't have the video up. I would love to have you live with me on Zoom so we can chat. Or on Zoom, let me know where you're coming in from. About 5 reasons Mary Magdalene is one of the greatest teachers historically of sacred sexuality. This is going to be so good. No, you're live. So great to have you guys here. Okay. Yay. I am so excited, everyone, for this conversation today. So like I said, welcome. So what we're going over again, oh, awesome. We just got a couple people popping into the Zoom. Welcome to the Zoom. And if anyone is on the YouTube, hop on over. So there is the opportunity to engage in conversation. Hey, Jackie. So glad you're here. This is going to be so good. Okay. So today, yes, talking about 5 reasons. I'm going to go over my 5 big reasons why I believe Mary Magdalene is one of the greatest divine teachers of sacred sex. And the reason that I thought this is going to be really incredible is because often I'll bump into people and they will say, well, like, what do you mean? What do you mean Mary Magdalene was a teacher of sacred sex? What? And this is because of all the things that we've heard through institutionalized religion. So there are so many people who first of all think, well, from what I know of Mary Magdalene, like, what does she have to do with sacred sex? Or institutionalized religion has marred her reputation, right? So as the penitent whore, the prostitute, how could she possibly know of sacred sex? So this is why we're coming together, because these 5 reasons are going to blow your mind. And also, which has been happening for years now, especially for speaking to so many of you beautiful women of Magdalene and goddesses and priestesses, over the past 2 years, really feeling a presence of the goddess, or for many of you in particular, feeling Mary Magdalene really come and enter into your field. So this should also bring through and really anchor in powerfully some of the reasons why and what that means and why she's here as a guide. So this is going to be, yes, such a yummy conversation. And really, as we're talking and as we're feeling this, lean into that gnosis, and that gnosis being that inner knowing. So gnosis is when we come to a remembrance of something just from within. And it's not something that we have learned from books or education, but it's when we hear something and it triggers our remembrance of something that is dwelling deep inside our DNA, deep inside our bones, our blood. And this is the awakening of the goddess. So So I'm going to just start with a really beautiful little piece to sort of bring around and anchor in. Hey, Joy, so glad you're here. This piece around where these beliefs, where this conditioning and this programming came from, to have us in a place where we became so disconnected from Mary Magdalene and from the goddess. So around 450 AD, there was a pope, and his name was Pope Gregory, and he intentionally went in and removed the contents and verses, particular verses from the Bible. So this would have been removing texts like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, and in particular in whole context, the Nag Hammadi and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So those are just some of the Gospels that were in those texts. And those Gospels in particular were Gospels that really showed a relationship between men and women that was in equality, where they were talking about sacred union, where there was reference to women as leaders, as teachers, right? This is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And so he intentionally had those removed. And this is where we saw the shift happen in the narrative. So he intentionally went in, tampered with, burned, edited, or destroyed pieces of information that were originally within the Bible. So, and what we saw because of doing that, this was basically revoking or pulling away that unity of the masculine and feminine, rebuking the power, is that the right word? It is now, of power, and also, no longer acknowledging the creative energy of women. And so not only did he do this, but we also saw that just in that act alone, he was able to do two really incredible things that we are still, and right now I like to think really powerfully recovering from. But one, he basically undermined Mary as a teacher. And two, he took that, the capacity of women as individuals who can take on leadership. So this was the big consequence. And this is where we see this following for 2000 years following the subjugation of women. And so this is even in 1969, the church came all the way back around to correct these, I was going to say corrupt, to correct the corrupt actions that were taken of Pope Gregory. And so they said and came clean with this, that this is not the truth of Mary Magdalene. She shouldn't be represented as this penitent whore, as the prostitute. But I mean, these were very misogynist indoctrinations, and indoctrination runs deep. This is what we see with any programming or conditioning, is it runs deep. And to be able to, an apology isn't going to shift all of that, that learning that is anchored within our being. So to be able to shift that, it requires our effort, our healing, and the whole reconditioning. So especially when this happens on a global scale, this is going to take time to reverse. This is where we come in. And this is where we are seeing and really feeling this rising of the feminine, where women are coming to stand for justice, to come back and stand for truth and come back home to the goddess. So this is what I found in my journey. And as many of you, I feel like, are probably going to feel the same pull, the same awakening. But as I came home to my truth, it was my promise to the goddess to share this truth. And this was, in particular to Mary Magdalene, as she was coming through to me, I was receiving these powerful visions, these powerful activations, powerful practices, being taken specifically into particular temple practices. And I hit a point where, why am I getting such powerful, clear visions of these practices, and I'm implementing them? They're really incredible ideas. To my husband, I think we should try this, and we're doing it. And so these incredible practices that were happening and shifting my life. And I thought, I keep getting them. I don't think these are just for me. And this was when I realized that this is where we have the power. And this is the promise of Mary Magdalene and Sekhmet and Isis and Aphrodite, this is the promise that all of these goddesses made, was to be eternal in this world that we live in. And this is how they're able to be present for eternity, is that they are coming here to each one of us to channel their wisdom through and back into this world. This is that eternal cycle. And how incredible that we get to be the goddess now who is declaring that truth and making that promise to keep that wisdom here and to share it and voice it so that it comes through powerfully, and where we begin to get to see the ripple effect and the changes as a result from being with our voice and being in our truth. So on my journey home, this was my promise to the goddess, to share the truth through my gnosis, as well as the sharing of the stories of the goddess, of all goddesses, and her truth. So I'd love just a hands up or a heck yes if you're on Zoom, if you're on YouTube.
I am like, whoop, whoop.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a hell yes from me. Yeah.
I love it, Jackie. Yes. And Jackie and I got to have some divine conversations. And so, yeah, you're so right. And that voice is coming through so powerfully. Voice and actions, Jackie. So I want to celebrate that and you. Awesome. Okay. So let's jump in. Actually, no, one more piece with that. So yes, anchoring in and feeling that as your truth. And I also want to just acknowledge that as many of us find our way home to our truth, this happens because we often feel that disconnect to the present narrative, which we are here to shift. So by suppressing a powerful voice, by repressing our pleasure, by living in victim mindset, this is the disconnect. That's the discord, where we may have been doing that for a period of time in our lives. And we're going, this does not feel right. There's something that when you just don't feel that alignment with your soul, and you begin to feel this is not my truth. And this is where that action piece comes in, where we need to start changing something, whether it is using our voice, whether it is shifting to pleasure, whether it is shifting to our empowerment, shifting from what we thought was a truth, what someone told us was our truth, and shifting from that actually and saying, this is not my truth. This is my truth. So we'll go through the 5 reasons today for why Mary Magdalene is one of the greatest teachers of sacred sexuality. And really just, this is an opportunity to activate deeper gnosis of Mary Magdalene, activate deeper levels of the goddess within you, or activating any of that gnosis, that remembrance that is just floating around in our bodies, kind of going, I'm here. I'm here. I don't know what to do with it, but hopefully activating that so that you feel, some form of impulsion or action that you can take to deeply step into connection with your goddess, with the goddess through you. So number 1, the one reason that Mary Magdalene is one of the greatest teachers of sacred sexuality is the fact that she was the beloved of Yeshua. And again, especially if you grew up within the structure of, yes, which is so many people. And even if we didn't, Jackie's just got her hand like, that was me. But even if we didn't grow up under, going to school that was teaching Christianity or Catholicism or any of this, it's still its voice. We've heard it within our culture, especially the Western culture. So, and this was not recognized because this, again, was in the edited narrative. So a lot of people are going to say to you, and my daughter is also in Catholic school, and she comes home and she says, oh, we did a blessing and we blessed Yeshua because he is, it's all, we just, Yeshua. And I said, well, what about Mary Magdalene? Because Yeshua was the male Christ and Mary Magdalene is the female Christ. And they were the greatest teachers. I mean, some of the greatest teachers because of their union, not because of one or the other, but because of the work that they were able to do together, this is one of the truths that I think is so important to bring back into focus, because it brings us out of that counterbalance that was created because of the shift in the narrative. And it immediately begins bringing us back to that center point. And that center point is where we want to get to, because that is where we come back to heaven on earth, which was their mission. That was what Mary and Yeshua were driven to do. And their journey together was to bring heaven on earth, or to bring heaven to earth, or experience heaven on earth. So if we look at the Gospel of Philip, there he quotes that the companion, but they use the word koinonos, which in Greek means companion, partner, or consort. So if we actually look at the root of the meaning, when we look at, so it's not in standard institutionalized religion, that can again be misread, where it's just saying it could be like a colleague or companion. But if you look at what is said, and word is so, right, we need to pay attention to word. And this is again something that has shifted in our world. So the companion, or koinonos, of the Son is Miriam of Magdala. The teacher loved her more than all the disciples. He often kissed her on the mouth. So when we actually look there, he often kissed her on the mouth is going to tell us that it wasn't just a colleague. We should be able to read between the lines on that one. And also going back to what the Greek meaning of this. So this is the word. If we sit, and we can sit again, coming back to Gnosis, what do we believe that means? So we can see that they were more than just colleagues. They were not just apostles to one another, but they were the beloved. I'm not going to go much into it today, but also many of us believe that Sarah is also the daughter of Mary and Yeshua. So there's even the familial lineage. So it sounds like coitus as well. Koinonos. It does. I didn't even think of that. I love that. So yeah, so we were able to see, oh, that's juicy. I love that. So we're able to see that their stories really became polarized from that balance point. So right, their story was that they were here in sacred union. And really what happened when they shifted the narrative was that Yeshua ended up becoming less and less human, right? He became this really divine figure. The chastity, he was monastic, purely divine, whereas Mary became more and more human. She was sinful. She had to be forgiven. She had to repent. So we began to really see how they were polarized from that initial sacred union. And I love the story. If in my group, if you head to the Facebook group, Sacred Sexuality, under the guides section, I did read it's my favorite story that basically tells us the history of Mary and Yeshua. It's really their love story. And so they both grew up in the aristocracy in the Roman culture. Their families were really well-to-do. They grew up very well educated, and they both decided that they were feeling, and I love this because it's such a beautiful parallel to what so many of us are seeing today, is that really realizing that there was a lot of constrictions, a lot of walls built up around us, and that there were expectations of what we were meant to do for work, for our life's purpose. There was, a lot of social obligations, and just feeling that, like, where's the freedom in our life? And so both of them actually left, and it was John the Baptist had created a community that was considered very fringe. It was considered very counterculture. And so they both went to go and connect. They were drawn to go and connect with this community. And of course, because of because it was fringe and because it was counterculture, they considered John the Baptist to be very heretic. And so their families, of course, forbid, you cannot leave. This is not going to look good for our families. This is not going to look good for your future. Please don't go. But this is where they ended up meeting. And Mary Magdalene actually did wed John first. She fell in love with him. He was a very, he was very loved. Obviously, he's creating something really incredible and really beautiful. And so she met John first, but it was while she was married to John that she met Yeshua. And the relationship with John, he started to notice the shifts and just the relationship that was developing between her and Yeshua. And he also became very, like, a lot of rigidity started to come through in how he was, I want to say ruling, but or the way he was leading that community. And so Yeshua actually left just because he didn't want to stir up anything between John and Mary. And so he left, but then Mary realized that she was not happy. She was not feeling the energy of the community anymore. And so she left John and went to go find Yeshua. And it was from this point where they became beloveds, where they committed to one another, and they became like, I just think this, like, if you've got a gypsy soul at heart, they created a traveling community where many women drawn to this community, but also those who were also feeling the pull to shift, not feeling that connection to the culture that they were living in. And at the time, Roman culture was also really forbidding any of the mystery school teachings and all of this. So a lot of the women who were priestesses, goddesses, the moon schools and things like this were all drawn to come and connect with this community. And this is what it became, was a community that was focused on teaching the wisdom of the mystery schools, founded in love, founded in community, traveling, and with the main focus of bringing heaven on earth into our experience. So it was really a beautiful spiritual community that was founded on growth and expansion and connection. So I wasn't going to speak into that, but it's such a powerful story. So we can, and I just think it's such a beautiful way to come to see what Mary and Yeshua, what their intentions were to bring to the world together. And so, and I love this too, in Mary's counsel, she says that in reference to sacred sexuality, or a sacred relationship with another person, she talks about how thou shalt not consume the other. And I love this because what she means is you must not assimilate to another or reduce another to your own image of him or her, but behold that person in their uniqueness. So it's all about, we aren't in a relationship, we aren't able to just come to possession of the other. It's about giving them the freedom to give themselves that freedom to be completely who they are, right? Without restriction. That's what sacred union is, when each man and woman are able to completely be in their whole and full expression of who they are. And this is where we have that sacred union, and the power of the sacred union is because that's where magic happens. And this is where they, through this practice and through this knowing, how they became, as a couple, able to teach how to experience spiritual transfiguration through sacred sexuality. So this is where I want to go to the second. The second reason is that Mary was a healer. So together, Mary and Yeshua, which we know, were powerful and incredible healers. One of the things that I love that they talk about is how she anointed Yeshua's feet before his crucifixion, which is a ceremony that is reserved for the beloved. So this is another indicator out of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that gives another indicator of how close they were to one another. And so, and we see this again, talking about the mystery schools and priestess teachings. This involves so many things under the sun, right? It's not just about embodying the goddess, but the goddess teachings are teaching herbalism, metallurgy, perfumery, astrology. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Teaching about the moon cycles, anything to do with nature, working with animals, working with children. So many things fit under the goddess teachings. So as a sacred pleasure and embodiment coach, this is the very first thing that I say, this is who I'm work with. This is who I serve, is those women who are called to the sacred work of the divine feminine, which is, all the goddess lives in everything. So when we look at these, there's a huge umbrella in which you might feel called to connect with the goddess. And so for her, one of the ways was working with herbalism. So creating salves and tinctures. We see that she applied this to Yeshua's feet before his crucifixion. I've got to throw this in because I also love this, but also in the Bible, often you'll see the cannabism referred as something that Yeshua would use to heal others. And this is actually a reference to cannabis. So herbal tinctures that actually had cannabis in it that he was using to heal others. So again, just looking at these sacred plants that often, like Mary Magdalene, are receiving a lot of taboo around, but are considered very sacred. So this also shows us that as healers, what they were doing, especially so together, they were teachers of sacred sexuality. So teaching about sacred union, teaching about the equality between men and women, and teaching about sacred sexuality as a way to move into relationships that are less shallow. And I feel like, absolutely, Joy. All right. And so teaching about things that are less shallow. And I think this is such a simple, beautiful way of expressing what sacred sexuality teaches. It teaches an experience of depth through the sexual experience, a whole fullness, right? And sex is our basic nature. This is something that might not rub you the right way. Again, just bringing in, which is totally fine. This is our conditioning, but it is our basic nature. We were born in and of it. So for these two to be these incredible teachers who are teaching us about it, and it's really bringing back in that depth of experience, teaching us about a relationship that is less shallow, where we are able to move through a spiritual transfiguration through something that is connected to our core nature, which is why it's such a beautiful practice to embrace, is because it's the easiest form of transmutation or direct connection to spirit that we can access. It's built right into our being. And so this is one of the things that they both teach is about how to redirect sex from energy towards sexual goals. So just the sexual pleasure or sexual satisfaction, which is a very shallow experience. And you guys often will hear me talk about, are we going to have appetizer sex, or are we going to have the fine dining 5-course sex? And this is that same essence. So if we're taking it and we're shifting it out of just these, shallow sexual goals, and we move it towards new ones. So that's goals like ambitions, whether they be personal, social, or spiritual, but it's allowing for that sublimation, that movement of energy with a purpose towards a goal. And when I teach about sacred sexuality, this is why I love going into masculine and feminine energy, which has nothing to do with gender, because both genders have masculine and feminine energy. We could also talk about yin and yang energy, or sun and moon energy, hot and cold energy. With the Sanskrit, it's the Ida and the Pingala. So, but this is what he's talking about, what he and she are talking about, is how to move this energy with purpose. And masculine energy is the giving of life force, and feminine energy is the receiving energy. And so this is what we get to see, is how can we work with that powerful energy? A lot of you will also know it as Kundalini energy. How do we move that to create a greater purpose than just base pleasure? And the other beautiful part about this is they speak so much. Mary Magdalene is such a beautiful teacher of the heart, right? And there's a beautiful practice of descending into the heart to connect with her or any of our other guides, to connect with our spirit or our direction. And the beautiful thing about when we are moving this energy through our body during a sacred sex practice is that once that libido moves to the heart, it becomes love. And one of the ways that I love to look at this, again, where we go to the depth, so it becomes love, but even better yet, it becomes a prayer. So it's when we're taking this experience and not just being in it for just the experience, not just in it for the pleasure, but we're really planting a prayer of intention to create something. And it's, for many of us, we know it as a way to create life, but it's to create whatever endeavor, whatever ambition that we are moving towards. But I love that, just a prayer, because we know how sacred prayer can be. Nietzsche once said that in true love, it is the soul which envelops the body. So when we can look at this, that when we have this meeting of souls, it's for pleasure that is greater than just the meeting of bodies. So when we meet with souls, so again, if we bring not just the bodies into the experience, we're bringing the union of the souls, we're setting ourselves up for greater pleasure than the meeting of bodies, which that's that 5-course. That's that 5-course experience. So we can see that sex without love can still be great. It can still be wonderful. We'll still experience, we'll still feel healthy, functional. It can be pleasurable. It could be sordid. This is one of the beautiful things about sex too, is within it, the energies are always changing. So it's always going to be different. We can always count on things changing, which means that sometimes we're going to have repulsion energy. That's just a given. But we are able to move beyond all of those experiences where it can become this epiphany, this level of experience of transcendence, where we are having communion in just its complete basic nature, because sex is our core nature. We're having communion with the presence. And this is that, what I truly believe is the presence of goddess or God or spirit embodying our channel, which is really incredible. And it feels like that presence, right? Where we are just here or there. It feels like we're here or there, we're everywhere. So this is, okay, so just to sum that up. So far, the first reason, because she was the beloved of Yeshua, which leads into the power of her and him as healers together. The third is because Mary Magdalene was also a priestess of the Isis temple teachings. So it is known that Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary did travel to Egypt to attend these teachings or initiations within the Isis temples. So they are considered priestesses of the mystery schools, which a lot of people don't know. But when you hear it, it makes so much sense. And again, this goes back to, so we see that, oh yes. Yeah, Jackie, you've got a question?
I've never experienced Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene in the same room. So I don't know. I'm just curious if anyone else has this thought that they're the same person.
So I'll share my thoughts on this, because there are actually this book, The Return of the Divine Sophia. Joy is totally right there with you too, Jackie. And so this is one of the, well, again, when we look at ourselves as goddess, and this is that, again, the power of the three, right? Like we see the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit, but also there's like the feminine version, the maiden, the mother, and the goddess, the highest self. So a lot of the times this is often looked at when we are embodying goddess. It is Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, and then Sophia. So I feel like that might be what you're tapping into. Or sorry, maiden, mother, and the crone. yeah, but still the same energy. So that being the three feminine energies, which again, when we in our humanity embody the divinity, it is all of those. So I don't think you're wrong to feel into that. Yeah, absolutely. And especially if that's how, if you haven't experienced having them in the same presence. Yeah. And again, the energies that they, yeah, they would embody, I would say they would embody very similar energies. I know for me, Mother Mary comes in a lot more of her hand. It's always her coming in with her hand on my back. Mary Magdalene often shows up more so as a sister or a teacher for me. So she often will, take a hold of my hand or link arms with me. But Mother Mary is really that mothering energy. But Mary Magdalene has also been said to embody all of those energies of maiden, of lover, of mother. Again, when we bring Sarah back into the mix, and many of the pictures that we will see in churches are of Mary Magdalene holding a baby. So yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up. So I would, if that's how it's coming through for you, it makes total sense. Yeah. You too, Joy. I love that you both were right on the same page with that. Yeah. And I'm glad you asked that, because it's definitely described, and you'll see they do specifically talk about that in this book. It's a good one. Give yourself time though. Okay. So, and yes, and I love this, that they've both attended the Isis temples. So they both would have that similar training. And the other things that I had not mentioned, just as I'm thinking into temple teachings, but also if you are someone called to dance and singing and music, things like that are also deeply connected with the temple practices. So it was in this space where Mary Magdalene, and again, within that traveling community, began to really be recognized as this oracle priestess. And everyone saw her as this light bearer who knew the all, which again, actually very much fits in with Mary and the Sophia energy Sophia is the all. But again, this is the image that was then marred or sort of fell far, again, when things were just thrown so far off center. So she lost this vision, unless it happened to be people who were deeply connected to the teachings, the mystery teachings and things like this. So this is where we get to come back and bring this truth back around. And sorry, what I also wanted to go into with the priestess teachings is a big part of the priestess teachings in the temples are these sacred sex practices, sacred sex rituals. And in terms of what I have been shown from Mary, have been these practices where she's shown me the rooms within these temples where I've been shown practices that were happening where it might have been a room of women, or I've also been shown, there was a time where I came into the room, and on the left was the women, on the right were the men in prayer, and then they came into practices together, and it was absolutely beautiful, where again, sacred union and sacred sex transcends gender, right? It moves beyond masculine and feminine, and it's about sex as a tool for healing, a tool for expansion, a tool for opening our channel to spirit. And it's about love. It is about connecting through love, connecting as souls. And this is what, as many of you who have these deep spiritual practices where you are having this direct communication with spirit will know, is the feeling tone that comes through these experiences is what often is so resounding after these practices. And this is really what I found so powerful when she would show me these images, was the feeling tone of how sacred and transformative and powerful these practices were. And I consider it such an honor to have gotten to see. So knowing that these were also rituals and teachings that she received training in, whether it was whether it was temple dance, but there was also temple prostitutes that were called kadeshas. And this is, and it was completely sacred. So prostitute at the time was not a word that had, again, this marring against it. They were highly revered. They were recognized as goddesses, as priestesses, that only kings, princes, men of very high stature had access to, essentially. And it wasn't for sexual pleasure. It was for these men who were highly spiritual to go and have these deeply transformative spiritual practices with. So it was about connecting with spirit through these sacred practices. So this is another reason why Mary Magdalene is one of the greatest teachers, because she had these priestess teachings and then came back. And this is part of what Mary and Yeshua taught, was about sacred sexuality, because this is part of teaching about union. And we know that when we find union within, what happens inside becomes a reflection outside. So it's such an important piece in creating union within, so that we can experience union and this balance and heaven on earth in the world around us. And so for me, what I know that they've brought through is things like Mary Magdalene teaching orgasmic dancing, or these trance dance states, which a lot of would be very similar to ecstatic dance and things like this. I recently was shown a really beautiful transmission that also showed that another practice that would come through was men would almost be like bodyguards. So men in adoration and protection of these goddesses would be invited into these temple dance sessions, and they would actually just hold the space. So they would, with love and adoration and awe, they would get to witness these priestesses in dance, but there was never any touching. They were basically there as protectors of the space. And the way I liken it to is how I feel with my connection to Star Brothers, Angel Michael, or even just the cosmos itself, as this penetrative giving energy, right? The cosmos or Father Sky is this masculine energy. So yeah, totally. Right, Joy? Yeah, it was a really powerful experience. And so, and this is just so beautiful. And I think, and that would have been, again, only, like, it would have, anything within these temple practices was incredibly sacred. Only it was just these very revered experiences. So this was another beautiful temple practice. And I love it. Yes, this is just anchoring in with that knowing. The other thing that I love is that we also know that men like Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, they were all believers of mystery school teachings. They believed in this. They also believed in accessing these dream states or shamanic dimensions through the mystery school practices to access their creative answers to any of their engineering dilemmas. So, I mean, we've got to open our hearts and our minds to this, right? If we want to learn from the best. So that was 3. The 4th is that Mary Magdalene herself was a writer of the Ascension practices. So this is what the Gospel of Mary is. It is a breakdown of a way to transcend or ascend the ego, essentially, transcend the conditioned self. So, and again, the narrative was shifted. So in Mary Magdalene, when you look at the languaging, she refers to it as the 7 powers that she's teaching us. So the 7 powers that can take hold of us, and she's teaching how to overcome them. Whereas when Pope Gregory came in, it shifted to the 7 deadly sins, and it was all about freeing her of the 7 demons. So again, it pegged her as, what is the word? As the scapegoat. Whereas really what she was teaching is that the 7 powers actually are what can overcome all of us and teaching us gaslighting. Yes. Thank you. And this is what she's teaching is how to become anthropos. So this means how to become fully human and fully divine. I absolutely love this. This is, and in the book, Mary Magdalene Revealed, Megan Watterson talks about how coming to this understanding that we are 100% human, 100% divine, not 50-50. We are 100% both. It's this overlay of the soul and of our soul, our spirit, and our humanity. So this is the goal, is to become this anthropos. And we do this by learning how to see within. So it's all about introspection, and understanding that we are more than just a body. We are also the soul, and learning how to connect with it in this lifetime. And I was reading another book recently. What was it? I believe it was The Sacred Sex Rites of Ishtar, Shamanic Sexual Healing and Sex Magic. And she was talking, when the author was talking about how she defines spirituality. And I think this is a really beautiful way, because it has changed for me. I think of when I first, it's a really good book. It's really good so far. I'm only about a quarter of the way in, but would definitely recommend it. But she's talking about how, or I liken it to when I first started yoga practice. I started because I wanted the physical practice. I wanted it for strength. I wanted it for exercise. As I came into the practice, I started to notice a subtle feeling that would flow through me. And this was when I realized, okay, there's something to spirituality. And I thought that spirituality at that time was just a stillness, a peace that I could come to in my body. What she's talking about is that spirituality is actually, and she defines it as, when I'm talking about spirituality, I mean that it is when I'm in a shamanic state and communicating directly with spirit. And that aligns with me now so deeply, because I can remember where I went from meditation, where I was just coming to a point of stillness, to meditation where I was traveling, where I was actually going places and seeing things, and people and visions were coming to me. So I love that shift. And I think that a lot of people, as they are on their journey through spirituality, will also come to this shift where it's not so much about just a state within our body, which is absolutely a spiritual connection. That's feeling spirit. But when we realize that we can actually ask questions and receive answers and have communications with spirit, is a very different thing. So this is what I believe Mary was talking about, is getting to a point where we can fully connect with spirit in that way. And so she goes through the 7 powers, being overcoming darkness, overcoming cravings, ignorance, the craving for death, enslavement to the physical body, the false peace of flesh, and compulsion of rage. So, which, I mean, we could talk about any of those for hours. So those being the powers that can overcome us, and the ways in which we can go within and connect. Oh, I'm so glad, Jackie. Yeah, I love that. So to go within and connect with our guidance, with spirit, with the goddess, on how we can move beyond that. There's also a quote that I loved out of, these are my favorite books. The Sacred Embrace of Mary and Yeshua, by Jean-Yves Leloup. And he talks about how the devil comes only to the place where we dare not give love. And this is this whole concept too, that, sin, there is no sin. But if we are not able to hold love for ourselves in some place, so if we are sitting with shame, fear, or guilt, we are trapping ourselves. This is where the devil comes in, because we're not daring to give love and compassion to that space. We're resisting. So, but if we can come back to that reminder that God himself is infinite pleasure, as well as reality, beatitude, and joy. So the world, our bodies, our minds can offer only pleasure because they participate in his being. So when we allow ourselves to be spirit, to be this open channel, to flow, to be this channel to flow the wisdom of the divine, of God, of goddess, of spirit, this is how we access pleasure, because God, source, goddess, God just wants to experience pleasure through our bodies. That is why we're here, is the universe just wants to experience the multitude of ways that pleasure can be experienced through every single one of us, is different, unique facets. So the only wrong that we can fall into is to forget to hold presence in our pleasure. So we need to become conscious. Yes. Joyce says, this is where we access pleasure. Exactly. And this is it. This is why we want to come back to sexuality, come back to our core nature, is because, again, our birthright is the consciousness of the divine in pleasure. Our birthright is the consciousness of the divine in pleasure. We were physically designed for pleasure, and we were born from and of pleasure. And we were born from and of abundance, right? It's all the same thing. Yeah, we were totally duped, but we can reclaim it. And this is why we're here. So, so this is this whole piece. And this is why I love the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And again, why she's such a powerful priestess, and why she's such an incredible teacher, is that she teaches this, right? And again, when we look at what the Bible was saying, it was really telling us that only, like, it teaches that real women are either virgins, mothers, or whores. And then women create all men, which means that if women are just those three things, then there's no real men either, right? There's only boys, good fathers, or sexually obsessed males, which is 6 fractals of the infinite capacity in which we can experience the divine. So it's time to shift. It's time to rewrite this, time to come to a new understanding, time to come back to the truth, really. And so with that, the last reason that Mary Magdalene is one of the greatest teachers of sacred sexuality is because she is a teacher. She's a teacher, but she's also a teacher who happens to be the female Christ, and who also happened to be recognized as the apostle to the apostles. And apostle, again, the Greek word Greek root for that is the one who is sent. And so let us pray for which is most right. Absolutely. And it's all about remembering. It's coming back to remembrance of our true essence. Exactly. Which is where we were duped. And of course, though, because if we go back to why the narrative was edited in the first place, is it was just the male fear of the power that women behold, right? The fear of what would happen if we had women who could be in leadership, or women who could be powerful teachers. But that's the whole point. That's the whole point, is that we are meant to be. This is the divine union, and women, as receiving energy, we have this power, again, through the sacred sex practice, to open directly to receiving that divine wisdom. So when we go into the practice with intention, the women are the receiving energy. So men, this is something for them to celebrate, because men are this giving energy. They're the doers. They are that energy that carries things into fruition. So if men could just celebrate women and sit in awe and embrace, there have been many cultures thousands and thousands of years ago, but where they did revere women and recognized her as this receiving energy. And it was about hearing what women were channeling into the present, and then the men being in their in their organic and natural power as these givers and doers of going, okay, this is what you're bringing through. Now I'm here to make it happen. So this is like, it's not anything about, it's not, there's the subjugation of men or women. It's not there. It's about how, it's how we weave together. Yes, Jackie says that, yeah, she's always been the ideas person and her hubby is the details guy, which is so in line with masculine and feminine energy. And so that's beautiful. That's why 20 years. Perhaps. Yes, I love it. Also, as the apostle to the apostles, in the Pistis, Sophia is quoted, you are she whose heart is, so this is what Christ had said, this is what Yeshua said to Mary, you are she whose heart is most directed to the kingdom of heaven than all your brothers. So again, he's pointing out also to the other apostles, this is why Mary Magdalene is such a revered teacher. Also in the Gospel of Philip, he points out that because Mary is there for his resurrection, and she was the only one who was there for his resurrection. And so again, she's the only one who Yeshua came back to, which also goes to show the power of their relationship. And so Philip points out, because a lot of the other apostles were just in complete disarray. What are we going to do now? And Mary, as this incredible leader, came forward with this information that she saw his resurrection, with the information that was given to her. And Philip actually stands up as some of the other apostles sort of accuse her and saying, why should we listen to you? And he points out that she knew Yeshua's love in a way that none of them could, which therefore gives her this deeper wisdom of Yeshua and his teachings. So perhaps we should listen to her. And Mary was really the one who pulled them all together. She was the leader. She was, the nurturer who said, we are the ones who now have to carry this wisdom forward. And so she was the rally woman that did keep things rolling forward. And then just going back to, again, that story that I had shared about Mary and Yeshua. Yes, Jackie, the pioneer. Here it is again. I love it. Yes. How did I not bring that word through yet? But they were absolute pioneers. She was a pioneer. Absolutely. And this is the power, and also goes to the strength, to show the strength of woman in this, is that, we could only imagine what it would feel like if we lost our beloved. And man, she pulled through. She was solid. She was strength. She was the pillar, and she was the pioneer. She knew the importance of what her and him were here to teach. And one of the things that, again, in this book, that talks about is that when the female Christ is once again returned to the earth, so meaning once she is again recognized by the majority, this is when unity and balance and heaven on earth will return, because this will be her ascension, right? Yeshua has ascended, but Mary's ascension is in her return and recognition as the female Christ. And this is where we'll see that balance of union again. And this is it, like, as the pioneer. And this is it why, and I'm just going to say this to every woman out there who is pioneering her way forward, in perhaps the sacred work of the divine feminine might feel like something that is woo-woo to a lot of people, people who might be doctors, nurses, teachers, therapists, psychologists. It's a whole world of professions where, when you're talking about spirit, or when you're talking about these practices that might fall in that woo-woo category, it can be really scary to leave something that feels really certain and really comfortable for something that there's that feeling of, well, it's that fringe. It's going to that fringe, that counterculture. What are people going to say? but this is the truth, right? Mary was not going to falter. This is my life's purpose. This is my promise as goddess, is to bring this truth into knowing, and as loudly and as widely as possible. And I even think, especially since they were a community that was traveling, we know that how they were traveling certainly does not look how we would travel as we would travel these days. So I just think that also goes to show the effort and the dedication, the consistency, right? All of these things that sometimes we might hit in when our conditioned selves come up going, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this going to get anywhere? Am I getting anywhere? Am I making a difference? Am I even being heard? But this is why we stay consistent, and why we put one foot in front of the other in this path, is because we know the impact that we're meant to be making. So, this is the 5 reasons that Mary is one of the greatest divine teachers of sacred sex. So one was that she was the beloved of Yeshua, that she was a healer. We know that she was a healer. She was a priestess of the Isis temple teachings. She was a writer. She has a whole gospel on ascension practices, how to overcome the 7 powers that can consume us. And she was the female Christ. She was a teacher. She was an apostle to the apostles. She was a pioneer. She was a goddess. She was a priestess, all of this. So I hope that was igniting, awakening, that there were levels of remembrance that are coming through from this information today. And if you are catching this on YouTube and you are not over in my Facebook group, hop over to the free Facebook group, Sacred Sexuality. I do these trainings every week, every Wednesday here in Canada at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, but the community is beautiful, full of goddesses, full of women who feel this connection to Mary Magdalene and all of the other goddesses, and expanding and remembering. Yes, I love that. And so thank you so much, beautiful women who hopped on live on Zoom with me. It's an absolute honor. And I guess I will see you next week. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what next week's is all about tips on how to connect with your partner. If you are finding yourselves in one of those ruts that you just, how do we get things going again? So it's going to be a really great conversation next week as well. So definitely come and join me either here on YouTube or in Zoom. So sending you so much love. And I will see you guys next week. You're so welcome. Take care.
Take care.